Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod and so thrilled to be here with you this morning. I always say this is my favorite time of year. I love fall. I love the whole lead up to Halloween. I love Thanksgiving. I love Christmas and Hanukkah and Kwanzaa all in the same week. I just love all that. And I love the weather this time of year. It really is my favorite time of year. Except that sometimes when you have a family member that's on the spectrum that you love, who's struggling with some of those things, it can make you frustrated, right? That this is supposed to be a time about joy and gratitude. But if you're feeling like you can't support them through something, it can throw everything cattywampus. So today we're going to be talking about some of the ways to help yourself, whether you're the person on the spectrum or you've got somebody with a special diet for whatever reason, or the fact that they're having sensory issues on the spectrum. I'm already saying hi to Ahmed. I think that's, or just AH, not sure. But thrilled that you are here with us. Hi. So we're going to be talking about this and more throughout the show today. If you guys have questions, please feel free to write them in. We're live right now on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. And I see that or Ahmed, I'm not sure because the way that the name is, wrote in from YouTube. So you can be writing us on any of those platforms, and then we will see your comment and be able to talk directly to you. I also want to remind all of you that we are live on those platforms, but we also podcast directly to podcast, any place where you get a podcast. We're a free download. And our fabulous Chris Desmond is showing you on the screen. If you're watching on one of the places where you're seeing video, you can see that we're on Spotify, we're on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, everything. Any place you find a podcast, we're a free download. Of course, we're all adults and we understand that there is no such thing as a free download, right? Because it costs us money for you to download that. We defray that cost by allowing sponsors to advertise during the podcast so that you will experience that. If that is in any way not conducive to what you're doing in your life and you're saying to me, Shannon, I really just need for it to be ad-free, there is a way, there is a path, Padawan. All you have to do is go to glow.fm/autism-live, and it's a $5 a month fee, but once you pay that, everything that we do at the Autism Network shows up in your inbox ad-free. For $5 a month, you really can't beat that, and it helps us to keep the lights on. You're helping to support us in our never-ending effort to provide information and inspiration to that larger autism community. You know, I always say that our community starts with individuals who are themselves on the spectrum. They're the beating heart of our community. And yet we believe that our community starts there, but continues out to everybody who loves those individuals and wants to support them. We believe that if we take care of that whole community, that we will get to better places, right? And that's very, very important to us. And just because I haven't said this in a while, I identify as a proud pony. I am a parent of a neurodiverse individual. So, and that's a role that I take very, very seriously. I always say I want to be my son's best ally. I want to be an advocate for things that are good for him, but I want to include in that all my friends that are on the spectrum that I love dearly. I just so appreciate, I don't get out much anymore. Let's be real, I'm a homegirl. And COVID just sort of cemented that. And I don't go out as much as I used to go out. Part of it is just age. But when I do go out, a lot of times I'm at an autism conference, or the other night when I was at All Ghouls. And there's a large portion of the population that is somewhere on the spectrum at most of the events that I go to. And I find that comforting. I find that I gravitate towards those folks. I feel more at home with those folks. And every once in a while, when I have to go someplace outside of that, I'm always like looking for my people. You can always find them. They're everywhere. But I like the balance to be, you know, like at least 50-50. I enjoy myself more when that is the case. But there we have it. Okay, so if I left anything else out, there are important things to talk about. I do want to say that we're talking specifically about gluten-free and casein-free. for this Thanksgiving, but that's not everybody's diet. And we've covered nutrition recently and talked about some of the other diets. But I want to say that it's relatively easy to be gluten-free, casein-free any day of the week. Now, if you just know some rules, and we're going to go over what some of those tips and tricks are, but also we just want to talk about how we, I'm very fond of a phrase that I like to say, thriving and surviving and thriving, not just surviving, but surviving and thriving. And that includes holidays, that we should not be discounting anyone during a holiday because we need to make some adjustments, because adjustments are easy enough to make. They really, really are. And believe me, in my family and in my larger community family, it isn't just GFCF, right? There's people that I love dearly that they can't have onions and garlic. You can't even be cooking onions and garlic in the house. And I know I say that to people and they go, how can you do Thanksgiving without garlic and onions? Well, guess what? You can. And it's not really that different. I know we all like our garlands and onions. Okay, I'm speaking a little too fast. That's sort of something that I do, but I will slow it down. Hi, Rodney. Thrilled that you're here. Thanks for finding this again. We haven't seen you in a while. Okay, I will slow it down a little bit, though. That's always a good thing for me to know. All right, but let's get started talking about gluten-free and the holidays. And I think that this is one of the most important things that we have to be mindful of, which is keep it simple. And we put the little lips up there because, they say the KISS stands for keep it simple. And they like to say stupid. I don't like that. Keep it simple, silly. Because sometimes we're silly and we try to make it more complicated than it needs to be. And I am so guilty of this. I don't know about the rest of you, but if I'm going to have people over, I always start out to say I'm going to keep it simple. We had people over for Halloween. And I was like, I'm going to keep it really, really, really simple. I always make a big tray of baked ziti because it's gluten-free, dairy-free, vegan. I know I can feed almost everybody with this thing. And I was like, and we'll have people bring things. Then it turned into, well, maybe we'll make sandwiches. Then it was a charcuterie board. Then it was a charcuterie table. It went off the rails. It does. And there was chili. It doesn't need to. So I say this to myself, keep it simple and remind yourself that it's okay to edit, that you can't eat 32 things at the table. Yes, you can have them for leftovers later on, but the fact of the matter is you could make it in 2 days. If it's that you really want to have all these dishes for Thanksgiving, take a week and have those things over a week. Don't have to prepare them all on one day because you'll make yourself a little nutty, especially if you're trying to make substitution. Okay? Keep it simple and then forgive yourself when you don't. That is one of the keys, because I feel myself when I go, oh, there I go, making it hard again. And then I have to laugh at myself and forgive myself. Okay. So let's continue on. Let's talk turkey, because I think everybody thinks that the turkey is going to be the big, overwhelming thing. How can you possibly make a turkey gluten-free and dairy-free? Well, first of all, you got to start with a turkey. Now, every year I call Butterball because Butterball turkeys are everywhere. I'm not saying that they're the only gluten-free, casein-free, dairy-free turkeys. There are others, but this is the one that I'm willing to do the research on every year. I did call the Butterball hotline yesterday. Because I said that it was for a press deadline, I had to go through a whole bunch of different things, but I did get confirmation later on last night that the whole turkeys, Butterball whole turkeys, whether they are fresh or frozen this year, they are all gluten-free and they are all dairy-free. I know it says Butterball in the name of it, but the truth, don't tell anybody, there's no butter in a Butterball turkey unless you add it, which this is great news. For those of us who want to start with something that's relatively, a clean slate in terms of allergens, this is great news. Now, could you go to a butcher and get a turkey that doesn't have gluten and doesn't have any kind of butter, you absolutely can. Can you go to a grocery store and read the turkey package that is not a Butterball brand and call them yourself and find out? Chances are that you're going to find that it's gluten-free, and a lot of them are also dairy-free. But I can tell you with all assurity, Butterball has assured me that all of their whole turkeys, I'm not talking about, I didn't research sliced, or if it was a breast or a leg or whatever, but whole turkeys this year, again, dairy-free and gluten-free. So, woohoo! But then you've got this clean slate. What are you going to do with it? So let's go on to turkey prep. And I think that this is a very personal thing, how you prep a turkey. I have found over the years that I have a very specific way that I prep a turkey. But I think it's like, here are these two menus that we have for you: flavors and moisteners. I know that sounds wrong, but I think the key to a good turkey is that what you want to be crisp is crisp, and what you want to be moist is moist. So you have some decisions to make for yourself about, like, are you the turkey leg person? Are there people that are going to be there that are turkey breast people? Because the breast will dry out faster than anything else. So you want to mitigate that by adding the moisteners. Now, typically, people would slather that thing with butter. I don't know if you've seen the thing. I learned this from Martha Stewart, that if you've got the turkey, and by the way, let's start with to wash or not to wash. Oh, it's so personal, right? Conventional wisdom always was that you need to rinse your turkey really well. And then a couple of years ago, there were so many people that were getting salmonella because they weren't cleaning up properly after they rinsed the turkey, and water was splashing, and it was splashing salmonella, and then they would come along on the countertop and they would do other things. So I can't imagine not washing the turkey, because if you thawed the turkey and follow those instructions for the pounds and make sure that you have put your turkey in the refrigerator, not on the counter, that's sure to do salmonella, but in the refrigerator the right number of days. And by the way, Butterball has a hotline that's already started. You can call them and tell them the pounds, and they will tell you. Hallmark did a whole movie on it last year about people being on the turkey hotline. It's a thing, and it's free. You can call them all the way up through, I think, New Year's Eve, from now till New Year's Eve. So ask them which day, what time. I'm putting the turkey in the oven on this day. It's this many pounds. When do I need to move it to the refrigerator if it's already frozen and you want it to thaw? But it is critical, because it will not cook the same way if it's partially frozen, right? But then most of the time when you open up the turkey package, there's a lot of blood. There is a packet of the giblets and the giblets and the body parts, and the neck. There's all those things. And typically you want to clean that cavity out, right? And I just can't imagine not rinsing it. And I try to rinse it to make sure that there's a straight shot from the end of the turkey out where the neck was, because you got the two orifices at the end. And if you rinse it well enough, water will run through the turkey. And that's a good thing. I don't like for that to be clogged up. So I rinse, but then I get up very early in the morning. I prep my pan the night before for the turkey and then refrigerate it. And I'll talk about that in a second. But I get up very early in the morning to prep the turkey. So I rinse the turkey, and then I make sure that, in your house, whether you use ammonia or you use bleach, don't use them both, because they'll make a gas that will kill you all, right? So let's not do that. Or you can use hydrogen peroxide, is very effective. And I wash down all the counters, and I wash down the sinks as soon as the turkey is in the oven. And I wear plastic gloves while I'm doing it, because I'm handling the turkey. And I make sure that I've already put my salt and oil and everything in bowls so that I'm not contaminating those bottles while I'm touching the turkey and while I'm doing those things, if that makes sense. I just realized I'm still talking fast. Sorry. So in any case, I think there's a way on the podcast that you can slow it down or speed it up. Sorry. But if you're not going to rinse, I don't know what advice for you. But they have said now that, it's better than getting the salmonella everywhere and not cleaning it up. Yeah, I like to clean up, but clean up properly, really properly. If you're going to use the hydrogen peroxide, you need to spray it down and let it sit for at least a minute so that it kills everything before you start wiping it all up. Okay, so what I prep the night before for me, I make sure that I've peeled a bunch of carrots and potatoes, and then sometimes I'll do other things like parsnips, whatever the people that I'm serving, whatever flavor profile. Like for instance, this year I'm having somebody who can't have onions and garlic. Otherwise, I would put onions and garlic. I don't use one of the little lifters in the roasting pan. I use the vegetables for that. So I put down a layer of vegetables. It's really very beautiful, and herbs in the bottom of the pan that the turkey is going to sit on. I find that it makes the turkey very flavorful. If you're going to make any kind of a soup later on, the broth from that soup is divine. Good stuff, right? And I find that people like to eat the carrots and the potatoes that are in the bottom. It makes a separate side dish, and the dogs love it. Can I just tell you? I also will put the organ meats in there, and the dogs go crazy for that. It serves all these purposes, flavoring, and then afterwards to flavor everything. So I lay all of that down, and it's very beautiful. I usually take a picture of it in the bottom of the pan. I refrigerate that overnight, so that's all prepped when I get up in the morning. You open up the turkey, I rinse, pull everything out. I put the organ meats. My mother always used to cook the neck. She would boil it to make gravy. I don't know. The neck freaks me out. So I do toss the neck. It's the one thing I just can't deal with. It's too many bones. If you cook it, it falls apart. And it's too much for me. So I toss the neck. Judge me. Do what you will. But okay, so you decide what the flavors are that you want to put in the pan with things. And you're also going to decide what are the flavors that you're going to put in the cavities. Now, you could do stuffing in the cavities. I'm a big fan of doing citrus. For chicken, I do lemon. And we've done a video about cooking. We call them dancing chickens with my son, and we would put lemons in both cavities. You roll the lemon a little bit, maybe stick it in the microwave for a couple of minutes. You got to stab it with a fork or a knife so that it seeps juice. But you put it in both cavities, and you will have the juiciest chicken you've ever tasted. And it has a nice little light lemon. Ooh, good. But for a turkey, I do organic oranges. And so I'll get 2 organic oranges, one that will be stuffed where the neck was with some herbs, and one that will go in the main cavity. Same thing. I roll it around on the counter a little bit just to break up some of the juice. I fork it or knife it and stick it in the microwave for just a minute, just so that it's a little bit warmer, so it doesn't have to go from cold to cold. And I stuff them in the 2 orifices, and I will throw in whatever herbs that normally I would put in. Garlic. This year I won't be doing that, but I've got a bunch of fresh thyme and sage growing in the garden that I'll throw a bunch of that in there. And but what I started to say, what I learned from Martha Stewart is there is the skin that goes over the breast. There is the skin, and then there's a very thin membrane before you get to the meat. And if you're very careful, if you stick your hand in, you can separate the skin from the meat. And the reason for doing this is twofold. One, you can shove a whole bunch of things in there that are moisteners and flavors that's really going to flavor that breast up. But it also helps when you later want to crisp that skin without drying out that turkey. So here's the part that's very critical, is that normally they would have done that with butter. They would slather the whole outside with butter, and they would slather over the breast underneath the skin with butter. And we're not going to do that because we're making a gluten-free, casein-free turkey. So you have choices under the moisteners. I use olive oil, and I'm very happy with that. And I put like salt and pepper and olive oil, and then I will lay things like bay leaves and sage leaves underneath the skin to really, brighten that flavor up. But you got to use something. And I was reading a post yesterday that suggested coconut oil. And I have to say I'm intrigued by that. I know it's going to add a flavor. I don't know. But what you want is something that's going to stay in place long enough that as the bird heats up, that it doesn't all slide off, right? Oil's a little slippery. Coconut oil takes a minute to heat up. It's got a higher melting point. So I might try some of it and see what the reaction is. It's so hard when you're used to making something one way to try another way for something as big as a Thanksgiving turkey, especially when you're having people over. It's like, But I absolutely, I love doing the orange flavor. Sometimes I've stuck plums, in years when we've had organic little plums and stuck them in. And I liked that. I have to say, one of the biggest decisions for me is how you want to cook the turkey. And because for my son likes the leg, but everybody else likes the breast, and they really like that breast to be super duper moist. They're not as interested as the crispy of the skin. So the decision for us is that we cook the turkey upside down. I know I just created havoc in all of your minds. But if you think about it, there's going to be the juices in the turkey and gravity is going to pull them down, right? And so, the turkey is sitting on top of the vegetables. It's going to get the flavor and the juice of that. So if you cook it breast side down, which is not the pretty picture, right? That you see like in the Norman Rockwell carving the turkey thing. That's always breast side up, and the breast is beautifully browned because it's the crisp skin on the edge. And you can do that if you cook the turkey upside down. It's not going to be as moist as it would be if you don't, but you can have the crispy skin in the last couple of minutes. Our preference is that the skin gets crispy on the legs and that we don't worry about the skin on the breast. We worry about having that breast be moist, and it's a very moist turkey. I can tell you, it's just like crazy moist. So we cook it breast side down. But first, the whole thing gets oiled and it gets salt and pepper and herbs between the skin wherever I can fit them. I stick herbs between, where the leg joint is. I stick herbs everywhere I can get them. And then I put the oranges in with the herbs and breast side down. And for the first hour, I have it covered. And then I kind of gauge it because I want to make sure that the skin is very crisp on the legs for my son. So you can decide from this list that we have here that if oil is not your thing, I put broth in the pan so that we're partially steaming it too. So the last thing before I stick it in the oven is I take whatever broth, and I usually do chicken broth. I know people go, you got to get turkey broth. Okay. But chicken broth is so much more available. You know what I mean? And I do organic gluten-free chicken broth. And I pour that so that it's in the pan and the vegetables are cooking and it smells the whole house up. It's lovely, right? I don't do the thing where I baste. I know I just don't have the attention span for it, but if I were going to cook it breast side up, you absolutely have to baste. But my method, you don't have to baste. But look at the list here. You could use water. I mean, you've got enough. If you've done enough flavors in the bottom, then you could do water, and eventually you're going to have turkey broth from the turkey cooking. People do wine, they do fruit juice, they do alcohol. You pick just make sure that the alcohol is gluten-free, right? People use margarine. Make sure that you're using something that doesn't have a whole lot of chemicals in it and doesn't have dairy of any, or gluten for that matter. So those are all the things that can moisten it, but you've got to have something to moisten it. And then all the flavors that you can get by sticking stuff underneath, in, or on top of the turkey. And this is assuming that you're just going to roast it and you're not brining it. We tried brining a turkey and doing the deep fried thing. Oh my gosh. I think, I'm not sure, but I think an ambulance was called. Everybody was okay, but it was a lot. Have you seen when they sink the turkeys in and it explodes? And I can't be a part of that anymore. I'm sure it tastes good, but I cannot be a part of that. Okay, so that's your turkey, and it's very easy to make a really juicy, flavorful turkey, no gluten, no dairy. All right? So what else is on your agenda? Let's move on to the next slide. But what else is on your agenda? But I want you to stop for a moment and consider that Thanksgiving, as much as we've made it about food, and we have we not? We have made it about food, but it really is not supposed to be just about food. It's supposed to be a day of gratitude and connection. If you go back to the earliest iteration of Thanksgiving here in the United States, it was about gratitude and connection. And that's really what it was about. And that's what it should be about even now. And especially when we have family members that maybe struggle with sensory things, how about we slow our roll a little bit and decide to make it about connecting with them? So it is a time, depending on the needs and the desires of that individual, maybe have them be in the kitchen and help you with some things. Now, some people are not about the blood and the whatever about the turkey. Man, as a kid, I could not have been around that. I could not have been. Now it doesn't faze me at all. But, and you might have a kiddo that the turkey's not going to be the thing, but there are other things that you can cook with them. But don't make it about just the food and the eating. Please try to remember gratitude and connection through all of the things. And there is no better way to connect than to sit and eat with other people. I started to say break bread, but we all know, with gluten-free, we're not breaking that kind of bread. Okay, let's go on to the next thing. So one of the considerations that you guys have asked me to talk about is, what if you're not having dinner at your house? What if you're having it at somebody else's house? And that's a little bit stressful, although it releases you from having to make all the things, right? But I want to remind you that it's okay to bring your own. We have a slide a little bit later on saying, make sure that you're communicating with people about what's going to happen. So if someone has invited you to come to their house, before you say yes, I'm going to ask you to have a deep, frank conversation with them and say, thank you so much for including us, and it means so much, and we'd really like to join you. But before I say yes, can I ask, is it okay my child or myself or my significant other is on a special diet, and I don't want to make that your responsibility? Will you be offended if I bring a plate for them of stuff that's already made that I know is completely free of the things that we're trying to avoid with them? I really want to encourage you to put it that way and not say to them, well, they're gluten-free, casein-free, because now that person is probably going to go down a stressful rabbit hole of trying to Google all of the things. They might find this program, they might not, right? But it's going to put added stress for what they already had planned, which was to cook for a bunch of people. But I don't want you to show up to a meal with a plate that doesn't look like their food without their permission, because some people lose their mind over this. So before you say yes, I would ask you to say that. Now, most people are going to have a hard time saying no to you at this point, right? Although I guess there are some people who would say, you know what, let's wait, which that would be tragic and terrible. But if that's how they feel, you really didn't want to have dinner at their house anyway. You know what I'm saying? If they're not willing for your child to have a plate that's free of the things that are really important, then you really shouldn't be having dinner with them, right? Have it at home. And maybe it'll be a small Thanksgiving, but you'll be able to enjoy and be grateful and have that connection. But if you can bring your own plate, as I said before, my son, he likes the leg. And so I would go to the store the week of Thanksgiving, and I actually would go to Whole Foods Market, and they sell they're legs, but they're not ridiculously huge like the ones you would get on a whole turkey, right? So I would get him 2 legs, and I would roast those in a pan and take that with me, and he would have that, and he would be so happy and thrilled. And now we're not taking leg meat away from somebody else, and it doesn't matter how much he eats of it or doesn't eat of it, because we're going to talk about that in a second. But I want you to feel like, and I suggest bringing not separate dishes, bring a plate that's covered appropriately, that can be heated up, and that you can set in front of yourself or your child, and it's been discussed with the host or hostess. Now, Is everybody in the world going to ask questions? Oh, you betcha. Oh, you bet you. And they're going to talk to your child about what they're eating. I am a control freak, so I like to go to as many people as possible before the plate comes out, whether that means a week before or at the actual dinner, and just going up to people and saying, hey, just want to make you aware of the fact that my child is on a special diet and he doesn't really like questions about it. So you're going to see that he gets a plate in front of him. They're not going to be able to stop themselves. It'll tamp down some of it, but there's always somebody at the table that's got a conversation about it. And you just got to accept that. And if you know beforehand, it can be the funny little thing amongst all of you that know that you're like, there it is. There it is. Shannon said it would be there. There it is. They cannot help themselves. They don't mean ill. They just cannot stop themselves. So, and you deal with the question and you move on. But don't be afraid to ask to bring your own plate. Okay, on to the next one. So if you are cooking for yourself or for others and you want to make a gluten-free stuffing, I just want to tell you, it's just not a problem. There's a whole lot of ways that you can do this. Somewhere on our channel, we have a recipe of baking the bread. Our first producer, Emily, was just so jazzed about this that she was going to do this end to end. And I was like, I wouldn't, not ever on a bet, but okay. So they baked gluten-free bread. There's a video of her doing this. She baked the gluten-free bread and then she cubed it all up and let it dry overnight and put the spices in and made the stuffing. Okay. And you can do it. You can do it. You can go buy a loaf of gluten-free bread and you can do that. No problem. Or for a price, and it's pricey, there are companies like this one that sell stuffing mix that it comes in a box and it's gluten-free breadcrumbs and the spices already. Remember when I had the slide, keep it simple? For me, that's simple. I would rather pay a couple of extra bucks and know that I'm just going to throw that into a pan and then I'm going to do with it what I want to do with it. That I'm going to make it my own signature stuffing and that I don't have to be cubing up the bread. But I remember being a little girl and, that was the job the night before. My mother would sit there with loaves of bread. Of course, those weren't gluten-free. And we would tear up the bread and leave it in a big bowl so that it got a little crusty overnight. I'm just not into it. There's other things I'd rather do the night before. But you can, and it's not hard. So don't feel like you can't have stuffing. Now, some people have stuffing made of rice. That's okay too. But I'm just telling you, it's not insurmountable. Now, for a lot of stuffing, they want you to put a great deal of butter in it. And then we go back to what are the things. I think we have a slide about butter substitutes that's coming up in just a minute. But just know stuffing is not something you need to scratch your head about. It's not hard. But now it becomes, once you decide what the bread or the rice medium, what are you going to do with it? Let's go on to the next slide. So, now with your stuffing, you can add whatever you want. What does your child like? What do you like? Do you want to add sausage to it? My son loves oysters. He loves oysters and sausage. So my mother would scream and go, you can't put them both in the same stuffing. But I do, because he loves both of them. If you are having people that can handle the onions and garlic and more spices, I know people who put raisins. I know people who put pineapple in their stuffing. It's like all on the table. Of course, you want to have a good broth to be able to moisten, or you could use water. I wouldn't use a lot of fruit juice. I think that would make it a little too sweet. But you can use oil instead of the butter. You can use margarine. And of course, some people put eggs in their stuffing and some people don't. The only thing is, if you're going to use eggs, you got to make sure that it cooks long enough that those eggs get cooked. Sometimes we all get used to easy stuffing, which doesn't have eggs, where you can just make it. You put the hot broth or water in it, and it's essentially good to go after maybe 15 minutes. But if you're using the eggs to bind it together, you got to cook it longer. Okay, so jazz your stuffing up. I think that's when it gets really personal. I know people who put cranberry and apples in their stuffing. My mother would go, what? My husband is a purist. He likes stovetop stuffing and you don't need to put anything in it. But my son, he wants oysters. And because that was something grandma always made, was oyster sage dressing, and now he likes to have sausage in it, which really, my mother is screaming from the other side going, you can't do that. No, you can, Mom. He loves it. He absolutely loves it. It should be things that make you happy. Stuffing is one of those things that's supposed to make you feel stuffed. And so yes, it should be flavors that you like. I also want to say, we didn't talk about this with a turkey. You can stuff your turkey, but you have to make sure that it cooks long enough and you got to get that meat thermometer out and make sure that it's the right temperature, because you can make yourself sick with undercooked stuffing or a raw turkey. Let's not do that. Okay, on to the next slide. Some other things that people say that they want to have at Thanksgiving are pie. It's a very pie-heavy holiday. If pie is not your thing, there are lots of desserts. My goodness, go on Pinterest and find all the gluten-free, casein-free desserts in the world that you can make. But if pie is your thing, pie used to be a little bit rough. It was hard to make a gluten-free crust. And I'm here to tell you, this company, and they're available at lots of different grocery stores. Even Trader Joe's carries this brand, the Holy Wholesome. They regular, like Kroger and Ralph's has this during this time of year, and it comes in a 2-pack. So you undo the plastic on it, and you can keep the bottom one for the bottom part of a thing, and you can take the other one, lightly roll it out with some gluten-free flour, and now you've got a top if you're making an apple pie or a cherry pie or whatever. I find that it's super duper easy and works well, and I can serve this to anyone and they don't know that it's gluten-free. I can use it as the base for a pumpkin pie. I can use it for anything, and I've never had anybody complain. They all go, oh, this crust is fabulous, and it's dairy-free and it's gluten-free. So there you have it. But there are also places that you can buy a gluten-free pie. I find that they're ridiculously expensive. Ridiculously expensive, and that sometimes the crust doesn't taste as good as this. Now, sometimes people want to do a crumb crust, and there's a company, Midel, who makes a crumb crust, like a chocolate one, that you can make an Oreo pie with or something like that. And my husband, he is a fan of the Dutch apple pie that's got the crumble crust on the top, which is super easy to do, gluten-free. It's basically sugar and just a very little bit of gluten-free flour that you can get almost anywhere. So pie, also not a problem. And pie is a great thing to include your kids in, even if it's just that you're having them help mix up the batter for the pumpkin pie, and just, have the little spice bowls ready and have them dump. You could have a 3-year-old dump spices into the thing and learn how to begin to stir, right? Great way to get the kids involved. But if you're doing any other kind of pie, absolutely. Maybe older kids can even help with preparing like an apple pie, something of that nature. You're working on math with that's really the only time that I use math is with measuring spoons, and okay, I'm making doubles, so how much is that, right? Teach math skills while you're making pies. It's easy enough to do. Okay, on to the next one. Okay. People often ask, though, the recipe, and if we're talking about the pumpkin pie, there's some things that you have to substitute. And rather than there's recipes all over Pinterest for everything. You can put in Pinterest, GFCF, pumpkin pie, and you will have 32 versions, and you can decide which one you like, right? But I think it's more, because that's available to you, I think it's more beneficial to just tell you some of the things that you can substitute for things, so you can take your favorite recipe and morph it into being something that's gluten-free and casein-free. So some substitutes for milk, and you have to think about the recipe that you have, which one of these things would work. In some cases, juice is a great substitute for milk. Water, we were just having this conversation the other day that, with the government being shut down, with all the SNAP things, I've seen a lot of people posting on Facebook saying, here are the things to donate to food banks, and don't donate this without that. And one of the big things that they've been asking for is milk that is hermetically sealed, because they say it's a big treat and there's all these things that you cannot make without milk, and one of them being Kraft macaroni and cheese. That a lot of times people will donate Kraft macaroni and cheese, but they don't think about the fact that it takes milk and butter. And we had a big discussion about this on Halloween with everybody about who actually uses milk and butter to make their Kraft macaroni and cheese. And it was about 50-50. There were people in the room who were like, oh my gosh, I never use milk. I use water. And the other people, and I don't use the butter either. And other people were like, oh my gosh, it's probably a whole different flavor. And it is, but there were a bunch of us that preferred that. So I just want to say to you that water sometimes is a substitute for milk. Not always. But there are things, there are nut milks. There's oat milk, there's almond milk, soy milk, cashew milk. And of course, the one that I use more often than not is coconut milk. If I'm making a cake, a gluten-free cake, and I make a fabulous gluten-free cake, can I tell you? And I use the King Arthur mixes for that. But instead of putting, if they call for milk, I usually put in coconut milk for however much. And everybody always says, why does it taste so much better when you make it? I don't know. Maybe it's the coconut milk, but that is what I use. Now, if I'm trying to make it more, I'm trying to make it like a lemon cake and I've got a vanilla cake mix, I might add lemon juice as well, some coconut milk and some lemon juice to equal the amount of milk that was called for in the recipe. I find that the coconut milk adds a richness that I really like, but you have to make sure that your guests also, I think coconut is counted as a tree nut. And if they're allergic, you need to be asking things about that. So those are just some of the things that you can substitute for milk. It doesn't have to be hard. I find that most of the things that are out there, I experiment with, and I find that it just handles it. Like the first time I added coconut milk to one of those King Arthur recipes, I didn't know, but it makes a very rich, moist cake. It's a lovely thing. Okay, on to the next one. Okay, then when you have to substitute for butter, we talked about this already. Certainly oil, and my favorites are the olive oil and the coconut oil. I love a good sesame oil too, but that adds a whole bunch of flavor that sometimes I don't want in the dish. If I'm doing something with tofu, sure, I want it, but a cake, I would never put sesame oil in, right? I have friends that are they love a whole bunch of other types of oil. I'll tell you where I'm finicky is that it has to be organic. That I saw a special once about canola oil, which canola oil is great for cooking, right? But I saw a thing about the difference between organic coconut oil and conventional. Oh my goodness, nobody needs to be using conventional canola oil ever again. It's horrible. Don't do it. So whatever oil you prefer, but understand that different oils are going to have a different flavor profile that's going to affect the dish that you're trying to do. And so make your choices mindful of that. I do love a good earth balance. It's much harder to find now. So many other companies have tried to replicate this particular brand that's the organic. And I don't think I bought it in 6 months now, but it functions very well as butter. I do not care for their sticks that are supposed to mimic unsalted butter. That doesn't work for me, but this stuff does work for me when I can find it. When I'm making a cake, though, and I need to be putting oil, whenever they ask for oil in any kind of a baked good, I automatically replace it with applesauce. Like if it asks for a half a cup of oil, half a cup of applesauce. Cake never sticks, don't have a problem. And better flavor profile, and I don't taste apple in the cake at all. Just saying, we learned that a long time ago about cholesterol, that we don't need the oil in the baked goods. We just don't. Now, if you were doing something like bread and you need to be rolling it out, you're not going to put applesauce instead of the oil, right? You would use olive oil for something like that. But broth is another thing that often makes the difference in oil. There are a lot of people that are on a low-fat diet and really don't want all of that high fat. and having good broth, good clean broth, whether it's vegetable broth or chicken broth, um, can act as oil in your dish. Okay, let's move on to the next one. So, what it really comes down to is what's important to you. What are the things that are the traditions that you want to have that translate to the table and what's being eaten? And really challenge yourself about, okay, do I need that? Is that important? If it is, what can you buy so that you don't have to do that? If you end up spending the entire 2 days or 3 days in the kitchen, you're going to be exhausted by the time it comes time to gather and connect. So be kind to yourself. If there's I love to make pies, but I can't for Thanksgiving. I just can't. There's too many other things that I got to worry about, right? So it's just time consuming. And I'm not taking the day before off. My mother always made her pies the day before. That's lovely, but I'm not taking the day off. You got to make that determination for yourself. My husband always wants a pecan pie, which is lovely. And I'm totally capable of making a pecan pie. But by the time you buy the ingredients and take all the time to make it, you could have purchased it for a lot less than the ingredients that you had to buy that you're not going to use for the next year. So sometimes it means letting go of something and saying, I don't have to make everything. What can you automate? What can you buy? If you are the bread maker of all America, you do you and you make your own rolls. But otherwise, you can buy gluten-free rolls. They're usually frozen. You got to find them. They're not in every grocery store, but you can find them. And then you throw them on the cookie sheet 4 minutes before you're going to eat, and you have beautiful gluten-free rolls, right? Or you can spend 2 days making them and making the yeast rise and whatever, and spend twice as much as you would have spent on all the ingredients to make it happen, and it may or may not work, and you'll be hot and frazzled. But if that's what's important to you, do that. But if it's not, let it go. Buy it. That's my advice for that. Okay, is there another? Yes. How can you include, I know there's 2 more slides. How can you include your child, children, family? So if we're really going for connection and we really want to be grateful, then instead of the mad rush to get everything on the table, consider what you want to do. Now, of course, some families go around the table and everybody has to say what they're grateful for. That's a wonderful tradition. For other people, that's like nails going through their brain. What's right for your family? What's right for the people who will be at the table? And it doesn't necessarily, some families do it before the eating starts. Some do it through the entire conversation while they're sitting there. That while people are eating, everybody takes a turn and talks about things that they're grateful for either that day or this month or this year. And it doesn't have to be about gratitude. It can be about anything. I don't know how well the people at your table know each other. It could be, everybody gets to give one compliment to somebody at the table. I find that our society is very weird about compliments lately, and I don't want that to go completely away, especially for our kids that are on the spectrum. Let's make sure that we're complimenting them and that we're teaching them how to connect with people. This Thanksgiving, that's what it can be about, is helping my child to connect with the people at the table. So a couple of more things to keep in mind. Let's go to the next slide. Some of my best advice, I'll tell you what, I laid in bed this morning and I thought about the fact that I was going to tell you this, and I'm like, oh, I am the worst at this. But I encourage us all to save ourselves and not set dinner at some crazy time. Who is the lunatic that decided that Thanksgiving dinner should be held at 2:00? I'll tell you who the lunatic is. It was somebody who didn't want to get up at 5:00 in the morning to put the turkey in. And I get that. I totally get that. That's a ridiculous hour to have to get up and put the turkey in. And I know I'm having people over this year, and I have to tell them what time. And I really, really, really want to say to them 5:00 that's when we're having dinner. But I know that that's going to be met with derision. and And then everybody's going to be like, oh, and then I'm going to have to worry about what's my family eating for lunch, right? These are the hard choices. And I don't really want to spend the day cooking, but I don't know if I can pull it off by 12:30, because that's the other choice. I really don't want it to go later than 1, because you know what happens? Everybody's blood sugar gets thrown off. Everybody, in that last hour while you're trying to get things on the table, everybody's blood sugar is off. Everybody's too hungry. Maybe they had a piece of pie for breakfast, which is not good for anybody's blood sugar. And I watched a friend had a panic attack at 1 o'clock in the afternoon because he hadn't eaten anything. And we had to lay him down on the couch and feed him a piece of sliced turkey because his blood sugar was so low. He was having a panic attack. So why do we do this? I know it's inconvenient, but don't put yourself through that. And I'm trying to talk myself through it too, and saying, do what's best for you and for everybody else. Don't eat at 2 o'clock. It's just a bad choice. Or if you absolutely have to because it's on somebody else's time, go ahead and eat lunch at noon. And then, pick at the things on the plate, whatever, and then you can eat leftovers later. Because isn't that really what it's all about? How long do they say Thanksgiving dinner lasts? That it takes, 5 days to put it on the table, and then it's done within something rude like 11 minutes, right? So don't eat a whole lot at the Thanksgiving dinner and then have the leftovers later on. I'm hearing myself say this. Okay, on to the next thing, which I think is super duper important. You've got to let go of the expectations of how much food your child is going to eat at this social event. Yep, I would slave over those, because I'm being facetious here, but I would make those 2 turkey legs and I would bring them and put the plate in front of him. And he was much more interested in all the smells and the discussions of what was happening. And he might pick at that a little bit and take 2 bites. And of course, people have things to say about that. Oh, you made all that food and he must not like turkey legs. Well, I would just very quietly wrap that up, put it back in the refrigerator. And then when we would go home, he would voraciously plow through both of those turkey legs. But sometimes our kids can only do one thing at a time. And if we're being fair, like Dr. Grampiche asks us to do, and we're saying, okay, you're going to sit with a bunch of people and there are going to be different smells and there are people you're not usually sitting with and the table looks different than it does before, why would we expect that they would be so into their food? Let it go. If they eat, they don't eat. If they push it around, and that's another thing to have conversations with people to say, leave them alone. They're not going to starve from not eating at this one meal. And I guarantee you that later on, when there's a lot less sensory stuff, they're going to be hungry, right? So let go of the expectation and don't lecture them and don't give them ultimatums at the Thanksgiving table about you got to finish that before you can go play with the other kids. Think of this as a social event that you're going to prop your child up for the social event that only happens once a year, which means the food thing is like number 18 on the list of important at this point. Again, feed them lunch so that they're not starving and let them pick whatever and feed them again later on. I promise you, you'll have a better time. Do I use canned coconut milk or the refrigerated carton? It really depends on what I'm making. If I'm doing the coconut milk or I'm doing coconut cream, which is, the much fatter version of that, which some recipes, like some of the pumpkin pie recipes, call for the coconut cream. So first of all, know which one that you're doing. But that I usually do the canned organic. But if I'm doing the coconut water, sometimes depending on what the recipe is, I generally get the carton of that. But otherwise, I don't get the carton. Okay. Hopefully that answers your question. But again, let go. What do they say in Frozen? Let it go, let it go. How much your child is going to eat. And ask everybody else to have that too. So let's go on to the next slide, which I think, we had a bunch more slides. Give sensory breaks. If you're with a bunch of people, either in your home or somebody else's home, identify what the safe space is for your child where they can go and have quiet. By the way, this is true for all of us, absolutely all of us. I know when we went to vote yesterday, I got overwhelmed sensory-wise. And my husband and my son know when I make a certain gesture that they were like, oh, leave her alone, step back. Because 8 people were talking to me at the same time. And I was like, like, stop. Everybody stop. When I walked in, they're all greeting you. We were early in the morning and there was somebody who it said very clearly in front of them that they were the Arabic translator person, but we were early. There was nobody there who was speaking Arabic. So she said, I can help you. And I said, oh, okay. And I said, I have my mail-in ballot, which I want to surrender because I don't want to vote provisionally, so do I give that to you? And then here comes the supervisor and she's like, she's talking. And now the person is talking. And now my son steps up and he's like, Mom, you've gone to the wrong place. This is for people who speak Arabic. And I was like, I know. She said she would help me. And now my husband is saying something to me. And now another worker, and I went, everyone needs to stop. Everyone's talking all at the same time. I'm here to vote, and I don't want to vote provisionally. Please, like everybody, and my husband and my son scattered like rats on a ship because I couldn't handle it sensory-wise. And I know I'm not the only one. So you got to build in sensory breaks for yourself. You got to build in signs that you can say to your loved ones, I cannot do this. It's too much, right? My family knows that when it's in the last 15 minutes of getting it to the table, don't ask me a question. Do something or don't something, but don't ask me a question. I know people mean so well and they're like, where are the spoons? Like I'm like timing down 15 things. Open a drawer. Look, find the spoon yourself. I become very intolerant. But think about your child now, because they're not on steroids. You got to give them breaks. Give yourself breaks, give them breaks, find a safe space, whether it's headphones, music, no music, quiet. I will go stand on the porch every once in a while in the backyard and be like, breathe, breathe. And when people are like, what's happening? I'm like, oh, I just need to get something from the garage. Lie, but get your sensory breaks in. Okay, I think, is there one more? We're running out of time. Yes. It's really critical, and I've already talked about this a little bit, that you need to tell the people, the family members and the friends, what it is what you're doing, what you're bringing, what's happening. They don't know. And I know sometimes we think, well, they don't really care. They don't, it's not really their business. Yeah. You're trying to prepare yourself and potentially a loved one for something that's going to be difficult for everybody, right? So letting them know ahead of time, like if you know that Aunt Martha is the one who's going to run her mouth about what your child ate and your child didn't eat, I really want to encourage you to get on the phone with Aunt Martha this week and say, Aunt Martha, I'm so excited that we're going to see you at Thanksgiving. Spread some love on Aunt Martha. Say, Aunt Martha, I just really appreciate your opinion. I just want you to know that we're working right now on a very specific thing. And what we want is for our child to be at the table and have conversations with people. So I'm going to feed him beforehand. And he's probably not going to eat much at the table. And I just wanted to make you aware of that because I respect you so much. Now, is it possible that Aunt Martha's still going to run her mouth? Sure. But if she does, then you get to have the higher ground and be like, well, Aunt Martha's being an idiot right now. And I don't know why, but sometimes that makes it okay because you tried your level best. But if you don't try, you're going to feel frustrated at that table and you're going to be like, why does Aunt Martha do this all the time? And it's your child's self-esteem that's at stake, right? So I think it's worth fighting for, and I think communication is always best. I think sometimes you're going to be surprised that somebody in the family is going to embrace this and embrace this difference about you or your child in a way that makes it feel like connection and holiday. So this is my advice. for Thanksgiving and having a wonderful time and eating what you need to eat and not eating what you don't need to eat, and ending it with a feeling of gratitude and connection. Starting it with a feeling of gratitude and connection, not something that, oh no, we got to do this, right? Or, oh no, this pie didn't make it to the table. Great, you'll have it tomorrow. I did one of the first Thanksgivings I ever made. A friend and I planned it all out, and everything was wonderful. And the meal was completely over, and we cleaned everything up, and we realized we never put the cranberry sauce on the table. And we were like, how could we have done? Everyone lived. No one's life was altered to the point of, we had to call an ambulance. So it's a good litmus test. Enjoy the day, enjoy the process, include your children in the process, find some element of something that they can get their hands involved in so that they're part of making the meal. Then I also encourage everybody to be involved in the cleanup. Even a very small child can pick up napkins and throw them away, right? Maybe with help and support. But I think it's important that we get everybody involved. Otherwise, we raise a generation of people who sit down, have the meal, and get up and walk away as if there were servants. There's no servants. Usually the person who cooked the meal ends up cleaning up. We can't have that. So get everybody involved right from the jump. My friends, we are off next week because we're taking a minute as we get ready to launch for the Festival of Toys. So you're going to see reruns playing next week that are toy festivals from previous years. Just know that our toy guide, it is scheduled to go live next Thursday. Fingers crossed, we're going to make it. And you will see what I've been spending all this time on the last couple of months, these amazing toys that we and our panel of judges have handpicked for the person that you love in your life, that you want to get them the most wonderful gift. I swear to you, there's something for everybody. So you can start seeing that next Thursday, and the week after we will be back with live shows, and we'll be talking toys for a little while. Plus, we've got some amazing guests coming up as well. So I hope that you have a lovely week before the week next week, and we'll see you on the flip. So happy getting your preparations together. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now.
If you found anything helpful in this video, please give us a like. In fact, make sure that you smash that subscribe button on YouTube and give us a like on Facebook. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Instagram for important updates. And please download our free podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much. See you next time.